Welcome back to the Daily Dope Show. This is Brando, the Weed Commando, and this is part 2 of the video where I'm going to go ahead and read the studies. These are just brief summaries of these studies, but there's a lot of them, so this video is probably going to run into an hour at least. Now, this is a direct response also to this nonsense here. Multiple clinical risks for cannabis users during the Covid-19 pandemic. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pretend like cannabis users are dangerous because they pass joints around and they cough and stuff, and they're always talking when they get high, and just by the nature of them being reckless people and smoking weed all the time, we can conclude that they're not going to be social distancing as good, and they're going to be not caring about they're just everything that you think of as like somebody that's reckless and careless. That's what they paint here in this little studies summation, or these different abstracts that they're trying to paint the picture of. And then we're just going to read the conclusion here. Our manuscript contains clinically relevant notes on the risks of worse clinical complications due to the COVID-19 in marijuana users. Although not included as a risk group in global health recommendations, marijuana users may be more vulnerable to contagion and worsening of their clinical condition due to COVID-19 infection at high risk. This can be explained both by the action of the psychoactive substance on the central nervous system and not immune system, as well as due to the method of use that the substance is usually used. So that's one of those loaded statements that's supposed to make your brain fill in all the blanks on, oh yeah, these guys get high and then they're all relaxed, and their nervous system is, they're not as alert, and their immune system is weakened because the weed's just weakening your immune system. Can't you tell? Can't you feel it just by the way you feel all relaxed? And this is all just unscientific, just bullshit. And then they allude to smoking as the method of, the way that people people use the cannabis, as they smoke it. And obviously that's not good, because this is a lung problem, this COVID thing. Just absurd. Anyway, in addition to the behavior of marijuana users can make them even more vulnerable to SARS-CoV-2 infection. At this stage, the pandemia is in, with increasing rates of morbidity due to the contagion by COVID-19, which is not true. If you look at all the data all around the world, the number of deaths, which would be the increased rate of morbidity, they're actually decreasing. Case numbers are on the rise always. The testing is on the rise. Case numbers are actually down everywhere. Deaths definitely not up. So this is kind of, if this was old like that last stuff I read in the last video, that'd be fine. But this was published on January 20th of 2021. So this is just total, conjecture. This is just people just talking. There's nothing to back this up at all. This population deserves more clinical attention worldwide. Oh, we should focus on those pot smokers. They're causing all kinds of problems. It's funny, I haven't heard this talking point really get out of this little research community that's doing this study here. So therefore, our letter manuscript can help doctors become more aware of this group and can develop a specific approach. Like telling your patients to stop smoking weed or something. And this is BMC, part of Springer Nature. This is just this cesspool, I call it, of so-called peer-reviewed researchers, where they create their own publications and pretend like they're peer-reviewing each other just because they can all read it within this this ecosystem of BMC or Springer Nature or whatever this is. And this is not generally acceptable peer review. This is it's just them saying it's peer review because they wrote it and a few people, 524 people have accessed it. So whatever, man. It's not gonna, and by the way, this, just like everything I read in the last thing, you are completely ignoring all the studies that are being done. You're completely ignoring basically everything going on with cannabis and coronavirus to date. And all you're doing with this stuff over here is you're taking some straight up Reefer Madness level, fear porn talking points that seem like common sense. Because if anybody's ever smoked weed, and most people have, in the first couple times you smoke it, it makes you more paranoid and you're not quite acclimated with what the sensation is, and the heavy heartbeat and the head rushes and stuff. All that make you think that some of the stuff that they're saying in here is true because physically and mentally that seems legitimate, because you can just kind of easily draw a line from, oh, I felt this, and they're saying that this relaxed nervous system and immune system thing could be because of this, and then that's going to cause me to do that. And it's just, when you got fear porn already out there scaring people, and everybody's got anxiety because they don't know what to believe or who to trust, because all this coronavirus information that they keep giving us comes with a contradictory load of information, sometimes from the same exact person, and nobody knows what to believe or who to trust. And meanwhile, these people here think it would be real easy just to slip in some Reefer Madness on top of the already anxiety-stricken public, and maybe they'll get a few more people to not smoke weed. I don't know what their ultimate goal is with this crap, but it's ridiculous. All right? There's real good research being done right now as we speak, and it's not being covered in mainstream media. You won't hear the FDA give it any credit. You're not going to see NIH give them any credit, even though some of this stuff is being funded by the NIH. So it's kind of like you got to look for it. You got to go dig around and find it on your own. And me, I'm taking a big chance by reading these studies. Ain't that weird? Just by reading these studies, I'm going against the narrative, and I'm putting myself out there as somebody that they will say is spreading misinformation. And all I'm doing is reading some studies. I can make a conclusion on my own if I want, but I'm going to tell you that that's my conclusion. I'm not going to tell you, take this as an absolute, and this is definitely the information you should go by to make life, changing decisions and stuff. That's not what I do here. I'm just reporting telling you what's going on based on what is available to me. And that's what research is. So let's get into this. Everything's going good. So in this post we have the latest research, and it's been updated in December. Research on THC, CBD, and whole plant research. At ACS, we've been monitoring the latest studies as they unfold. Every month we update this article with new COVID-19 and cannabis research in hopes of shedding light on the most promising discoveries. So we're going to get right into this, and it starts with clinical trials. Now keep in mind that clinical trials in America are going to be really hard to do because of the restrictions on cannabis in America. So if I keep reading about all these studies and they're from Israel, Russia, Europe, India, that's because they don't have the same restrictions as we do on the research. And it's absurd that we do, and it's because cannabis is still scheduled as a Schedule 1 narcotic in America. So as recent, and here's the first one, trial of COVID-19, MGC Pharma is looking to develop a clinically backed supplement. Recent clinical trial of 50 COVID-19 patients across 3 hospitals in Israel and India showed all patients who received standard care along with MGC Pharma's trademark supplement Artemis C recovered after 15 days of treatment. Additionally, prior to recovering, the patients did not develop severe conditions that required ICU treatment, additional oxygen, and medical ventilation. MGC Pharma believes the success of this clinical trial will open markets for the supplement, which already has commercial deals in Israel, Russia, and Eastern Europe. While the supplement's initial formula doesn't contain cannabinoids, MGC Pharma announced plans to add these natural compounds to the ingredient list in time for phase 3 clinical trials that could happen in the first half of 2021. Phase 3 will involve up to 250 patients and investigate the supplement's effect on various diseases related to cytokine storms, including Covid-19, the flu, inflammatory bowel, and autoimmune diseases. In the Phase 3 trial, MGC Pharma hopes to incorporate ingredients such as phytocannabinoids to market Artemis C and polypharmaceutical product as a polypharmaceutical product in the long term. I don't have a whole lot of comments to make on these studies, and I'm probably just going to run right through them. There's a couple things here and there that I remember I have to make a comment about, but for the most part, there's a lot to go through, so I'm just going to read right through these, and if anyone has any questions about them, or maybe we as a community would want to do a deeper dive into any of these, let me know in the comments below. Worldwide, here's one. Another clinical trial of Cardiol Therapeutics begins phase 2 and 3 study of CBD, a CBD pharmaceutical. Worldwide Clinical Trials, a major contract research organization involved with COVID-19 trials, announced it will conduct phase 2 and 3 studies of Cardiol RX, an ultra-pure, extra-strength cannabidiol formula that is THC-free and taken orally. Cardiol released the results of its phase 1 study in December, which assessed the safety of Cardiol RX in adults, showing it to be well tolerated with no adverse effects reported. Phase 2 and 3, which will include 422 hospitalized COVID-19 patients, is designed to further investigate the safety and effectiveness of Cardiol RX, this time with a primary focus on COVID-19 patients who have a prior history or are at risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Cardiol hopes the findings will provide invaluable data about Cardiol RX's potential to offer therapeutic treatment for inflammatory heart disease and heart failure thanks to the cannabinoids in its formula, which have been shown to offer anti-inflammatory effects and could reduce mortality in COVID-19 patients with cardiovascular complications. So like the problem with the cytokine storms where they cause ARDS in the lungs for people dying of COVID, and that's what kills you because of the lungs. Sometimes this reaction is happening to the heart, or it's causing people with heart problems to have heart attacks, and we've heard a lot about people with coronavirus dying from heart attacks or strokes. So another thing that all this research is doing is it's opening up the research into these areas, like into cannabinoids as a treatment for strokes and heart attacks, which is already a big area of study and research currently, but this is just adding more data to those studies and more credulence to the overall research. So this is kind of it's showing us a lot about how big pharma solutions really aren't doing very good. And if you look into the vaccines and the rollout and how that's going, it looks like it's a pretty disastrous situation. Haven't heard of anyone dying in these cannabinoid trials as of yet, or any really adverse reactions for that matter. So we have a potential COVID treatment. Development of CBD soft gel nasal spray is underway. A few months ago, Prevacutical Medical Incorporated announced its partnership with UniQuest Party Limited to apply its cannabinoid sol gel technology to a new nasal spray product. This product would be intended as a potential treatment for COVID-19. While making this announcement, the company said it was not making direct claims that the spray can eliminate, cure, or contain the deadly virus. And believe me, if you're located in America, you can't do that, or the FDA shuts you down and won't let you even do your study. So don't try it. Don't make these claims, please. Prevaceuticals said it would provide the CBD extract, which could potentially prevent SARS-CoV-2 from infecting nasal mucosa tissue. The University of Queensland team said it was responsible for transforming the CBD extract into a formulation that could be used with a nasal spray device. This project is set for completion in October. Upon completion, Prevaceutical announced it would execute preclinical testing and seek government approval to bring the treatment to market. November 2020 update. Prevaceutical received notification that its proposal to bring Sol-Gel COVID-19 spray to market will not be receiving further consideration under Canada's National Medical Research Strategy. However, Prevaceutical does have alternatives to pursue new support for the treatment program, and the project is still scheduled for completion at the end of October 2020. The company plans to use additional findings and data from the project's final report to submit a revised application and is working to secure funds from other sources. Because treatment under this program will be self-administered over-the-counter system, Prevaceutical anticipates that the required regulatory approval process will be much quicker, and if it was a prescription drug, it could potentially give patients a COVID-19 relief option while clinical trials and vaccine research is underway. December 2020 update. Prevaceutical Medical has successfully developed a proprietary Sol-Gel formula called SARS-CoV-2 soft gel infused with a high CBD strain that can be self-administered using a Sol-Gel nasal spray device. Nasal delivery allows for more concentrated dose and is a better targeted delivery method versus oral formulas, which can become diluted by the body's metabolism. The Sol-Gel nasal formula is ready for preclinical evaluations to assess its ability to treat COVID-19 symptoms, and the company intends to move to clinical trials as quickly as possible. While Prevaceutical Medical is not making any claims that its nasal product can cure COVID-19 at this time, the company does point to 2 peer-reviewed papers that says CBD strains could have potential benefits to treat SARS-CoV-2 infection, which causes COVID-19. Here's some research now we're on THC research. This study reveals how a THC cannabinoid may treat acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. COVID-19 has been known to cause cytokine storms, sending the immune system into overdrive, which can trigger acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. ARDS is the #1 cause of death resulting from COVID-19 respiratory complications. According to research from the University of South Carolina, published in the British Journal of Pharmacology, THC can prevent this deadly side effect when ARDS is caused by a bacterial toxin known as staphylococcal enterotoxin. The study's authors further deduced that THC could be a viable treatment for ARDS caused by COVID-19 due to its anti-inflammatory property. Collectively, this study suggests that the activation of cannabinoid receptors may serve as a therapeutic modality to treat ARDS associated with COVID-19, according to the study's abstract. Here's another study using THC to treat COVID-induced insomnia. In a recent study, more than 30% of healthcare workers on the front lines of the COVID pandemic in China reported suffering from insomnia. Those who had sleep issues were also more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and stress-based trauma. These people, just to clarify, this is not people that have COVID. The COVID wasn't causing insomnia. It was them working in the front lines that was causing the insomnia. And insomnia is like a weird thing because if you don't treat it, or if you don't change what's causing it, the depression, anxiety, or stress that's causing it, the insomnia causes more anxiety, stress, and trauma. So it's just a really bad road, you don't want to be on. A second survey performed by Sleep Standards found that 41% of the frontline workers in the U.S. are experiencing insomnia, 27% are suffering from nightmares, and on average, all are getting about 5 hours of shut-eye each night. Although the research was performed in China and the U.S., the results are likely indicative of worldwide suffering. Could marijuana help alleviate these symptoms? Studies and anecdotal evidence indicate it could. According to a recent study cited by Benzinga, cannabis can be extremely effective treatment for acute insomnia, particularly when cannabis is made up of a blend of THC and CBD. In this study conducted by the University of Western Australia, THC patients reported sleeping more hours, falling asleep faster, and getting back to sleep more easily after waking up in the middle of the night. And also, quote, this study represents the most rigorous clinical trial ever undertaken to assess therapeutic potential of medical cannabis to treat the symptoms of chronic insomnia, said head researcher Peter Eastwood in a published statement. Now, this brings me back to all of the times I've mentioned insomnia in videos I've made in the past. Whether it was insomnia getting strucken down as a potential qualifying condition for medical marijuana in medical marijuana states, or whether it was bogus research at the NIH saying that, cannabinoids don't help with insomnia, and if anything, it makes it worse, like they always do. They always got to countersue. So it's always been garbage, and they always act like, oh, CBD or THC, it doesn't knock you out, so it can't be good for insomnia. Or in the case of indica, oh, just because you smoke a joint and it makes you fall asleep, well, that's not a cure for insomnia. So that's just like I said in the last video about the premise where they overshoot the claim into some claim that's impossible to prove. Then in this insomnia situation, they do the same thing. They're like, oh, this action here doesn't create this action here, so it's not good for insomnia. Well, the thing is if you consume THC and CBD on a regular basis, it's supposed to help you regulate your sleep. It's supposed to help you fall into a habit of having a regular sleep schedule. And as far as like waking up in the middle of the night and being able to go back to sleep, all of these things are benefited by CBD consumption on a regular basis or THC consumption on a regular basis. Not instant. Not that, oh yeah, I smoked this joint, boom, fell right asleep. Although I would have to argue that medibles do have that effect on a lot of people. So it could, I just don't believe their research, first of all, and the claims they make. And I will say again, I don't know when I might have mentioned this in the last video, I'm going to go ahead and make some wild claims too without scientific backing, because that's what they do all the time. And if they do have scientific backing, it's a bogus study. You can see right through it. And they start with a hypothesis and then try to prove their hypothesis instead of starting with a hypothesis that would make sense. They start with a negative hypothesis or something over the top, and then they either try to prove they're negative, or they pretend like they tried to prove the thing but they couldn't do it, so the thing isn't a good hypothesis. And they do this with everything with weed. And like I said before, they have a little bullet list of things that they can no longer do this to because we've proven them wrong over and over again. So they make a list and they say, oh, cannabis is good for appetite and chemotherapy and maybe some headaches or something or whatever, but that's it. Nothing else. There's no studies. Studies are inconclusive, and they're just full of it. All right, back to the article. Preclinical research. THC protects mice from ARDS. And this is the big one, guys. This is why everybody else started doing their research about this ARDS protection. To date, CBD has received the most headlines from COVID treatment. Here are the reasons. CBD exhibits strong anti-inflammatory properties. Also, CBD is non-psychoactive, which is an important factor for young and elderly patients, but CBD is not the only cannabinoid that exhibits anti-inflammatory powers. And there is why everybody keeps talking about CBD for everything. But I'm just going to tell you that CBD, and especially CBD on its own, isn't even really medicine, all right? It's barely medicine. It's a supplement at best. But you mix it with some other cannabinoids or terpenoids, or what they do in other studies where they use CBD in conjunction with steroids or other medicines, and bam, all of a sudden you are finding astronomical results, positive results. So this whole notion that CBD is the thing we should use to do all this cannabis research because it doesn't get you high is the most frustrating thing I've ever had to deal with in all my research. It's just so annoying to keep hearing that being brought out like it matters, you know, like Valium don't get you high, or like you know, when you go to the doctor to get surgery and you got to get surgery, so they're going to, you know, put you under or give you some Demerol or something that gets you high. Are you going to not do that because it gets you high? This is the stupidest logic there ever was. And by the way, getting high isn't the worst thing in the world when it comes to THC. And if you have enough CBD mixed with it, you don't even really get that high. Or the bad parts of the high, the paranoia, that don't really happen. The latest study was inspired by the fact that the THC binds with CB2 receptors, which are mostly located in the cells of the immune system. When these receptors are activated by THC, they can suppress the dangerous hyperinflammatory response. The cutting-edge research published in the Frontier Pharmacology shows THC can protect mice from the effects of this hyperinflammatory response known as acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. ARDS leads to severe lung injury, which is the number one cause of death in COVID patients. And I believe the study said that 100% of these mice did not have the cytokine storm develop into ARDS. 100% of them. You know, I'd rather be hooked up to a CBD drip than a ventilator, when ventilators are killing 9 out of 10 patients. Clinical trial. This is on the CBD research section, finally. Clinical trial, Canadian pharma discover a new mechanism of action of CBD in the body, opening up the doors for various therapeutical applications. Axira Pharma, a Canadian startup, is planning to begin clinical trials in manufacturing CBD as a treatment for cardiac arrhythmias, or irregular heartbeats, linked to the side effects of COVID-19 drug therapies. If left untreated, arrhythmias can lead to cardiac arrest and other serious heart conditions. In March, Axira launched a subsidiary. Sorry about my delivery of speech today. I don't know what's wrong. I just keep stumbling over every word. But let's try that again. In March, Axira launched a subsidiary company to begin the manufacturing and research process. According to Manit Patel, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of the company, if it all goes well, they may be launching CBD for COVID-19 before the end of the year. In a recent interview on Money Control, Axira's president and co-founder Shrima Merchant said, quote, "Some of the repurposed drugs like hydroxychloroquine are found to cause arrhythmia in certain cases, a lethal side effect that CBD can rescue. We found ourselves in a very obvious position to help make COVID treatment safer and affordable and accessible to patients with comorbidities," he said. November update. Shrima's research revealed CBD can reduce the number of arrhythmias when given prior to an episode, and they want to understand why. This is a huge breakthrough nonetheless. And maybe this is all good that all this research was allowed to get greenlit. I don't think, half of this research probably wouldn't even have been possible if there wasn't a pandemic. Based on that one statement, hey, because of the epidemiological situation going on, we have to try everything we can. All right. And that's normally they don't say that. I mean, cancer is out here killing 1 million people a year or more in America, and we don't get what we can't be like, hey, we need to emergency study this right now. No, just when 400,000 people die of a pandemic, then we can do emergency pull out all stops. So what they found was that they discovered CBD interacts with the sodium ion channels in the body and can prevent arrhythmias when taken as a daily dosage. This mechanism of action is very different from what the team expected. While most research focuses on the interaction between CBD and the receptors of the endocannabinoid system, sodium ion channels have not been explored. Based on this affinity, Shrima believes they will discover additional therapeutic benefits of CBD beyond arrhythmias by looking at other ion channels in the body. More research on CBD-infused exosomes as a targeted COVID-19 therapy. On April 17th, Inocan Pharma announced a sponsorship research agreement with Tel Aviv University to study CBD as a cell therapy treatment for COVID-19. In the first of its kind study, the Israeli team will inject CBD into exosomes, cells that transport proteins and genetic information to other cells, and use them to target organs damaged by coronavirus. Researchers hypothesize that CBD's known anti-inflammatory powers will help repair damage in the body, and particularly the infected lung cells. Researchers also believe that therapy could target diseases of the central nervous system, which may provide treatments for epilepsy and Alzheimer's disease. The extensive research funded by Inocan cost about $450,000 in the first stage alone. The terms of the agreement gave Inocan exclusive rights to Ramon technology to develop the CBD-based cell therapy treatment. November update. In October of 2020, Inocan Pharma announced the publication of 2 scientific articles supporting its approach of using CBD-loaded exosomes for the treatment of COVID-19. The first paper outlined that the mesenchymal stem cells, MSCs, and their exosomes have potential therapeutic functions in handling the coronavirus. Specifically, exosomes have the ability to prevent or help patients clear problematic alveolar fluid and promote tissue recovery of the skin, heart, and blood vessels by secreting protective material. And I'm just going to stop for a second just to make the announcement that no, I am not a scientific expert or doctor or any of these things where I would know how to pronounce a lot of these technical terms. So if I'm hacking through this and stumbling and tripping over these words, please excuse me and bear with me. If you're a scientist and you're just kind of making fun of the way that I don't know how to pronounce these things, that's fine. I'm just somebody doing research and reporting my research to others and maybe reading research that is available to me. I don't claim to be a doctor or a scientist or any of that. Okay, the second paper, an animal study done on mice, demonstrated that CBD can significantly reverse the lung damage and adverse symptoms of acute respiratory distress syndrome by increasing levels of apelin, a peptide in the body that helps to mitigate the effects of immune injury. Using Inocan's liposomal CBD treatment on over 35 mice, the study also found that significant amounts of CBD remain in the mice's blood 21 days after a single injection. This prolonged release can allow the endocannabinoid system to regulate apelin over a longer period of time and continue to limit excessive lung inflammation. Now we have a lab study. CBD may help avert lung destruction in COVID-19. While this isn't a brand new study, we had to include it due to the evidence it presents. This is the study that got everybody else wanting to do this. In July of 2020, researchers at the Dental College of Georgia and Medical College of Georgia performed laboratory studies that indicate pure CBD can help the lungs recover from the excessive inflammation caused by COVID-19. A synthetic double-stranded RNA called poly-IC enabled the findings. Poly-IC represents a new and safe way to replicate lung damage caused by acute respiratory distress syndrome. During the study, mice received 3 doses of poly-IC in the nasal passageway, followed by shots of CBD for a total of 3 days to mimic the time a human would begin to experience trouble breathing and is likely to seek medical care. Researchers measured lung function after CBD treatment, noting that oxygen levels went up while the temperatures and inflammation levels went down. Based on the success of the study, researchers plan to look at other organs impacted by COVID-19 next. Another study, CBD for the anxiety related to COVID-19. Beyond CBD's ability to potentially alleviate severe COVID-19 symptoms and block entry points for COVID-19, researchers also cite a study on Ebola disease patients in which CBD was suggested as a supplementary treatment. They say patients recovering from COVID-19 may undergo similar mental and social stressors due to the residual chronic inflammation and autoimmune responses. This indicates that randomized clinical trials to test how CBD can alleviate anxiety and fear associated with COVID-19 may be beneficial. All right, research. There's a new study in Maryland to determine if CBD can treat COVID. New study from the University of Maryland School of Medicine follows the work of Canadian researchers at the University of Lethbridge to examine CBD's role in COVID-19. Now, I wish they would have included the Lethbridge study before this, but I think it's coming up soon. It's a couple things later. Let's go ahead and read that one first. So this is an analysis of high CBD medical cannabis for the potential COVID-19 therapy. Scientists from Canada's University of Lethbridge, in partnership with Canadian research firms Pathway RX and Swish, recently found that specific medical cannabis sativa components in potential CBD strains could offer meaningful treatment for COVID-19 symptoms. The university stresses that further clinical trials are required to make definitive claims, but they are eager to share what they've discovered and recently submitted their study for peer review. In this study, University of Lethbridge researchers examined human tissue to discover how cannabis extracts affects CE2 and TMPRSS2 protein receptors. These are the same receptors that coronavirus binds to in order to hijack and infect the body. Specifically, the team used cannabis to modulate the levels of these proteins and found that 13 different high CBD extracts could downregulate TMPRSS2, thereby inhibiting one of the key gateways for COVID-19 virus to enter human cells. Based on this research, specific strains of the medical cannabis extracts could theoretically be used as preventative mouthwash therapies. The Canada research team is, quote, actively pursuing partnerships that can conduct clinical trials. May 24th, 2020 update. Research partnerships extend to Asia. On May 13th, Swish announced new partnerships with Asia, an international agri-technology company, to advance the development of cannabis therapy for COVID-19. Through the partnership, Asia will deploy Swish's technology to further research, develop, test, and validate applications of its high CBD extracts to help reduce virus transmission rates. In a joint statement, executives from Asia and Swish said, quote, in addition to the domestic research program Swish is implementing, we hope to expand the network being developed by Asia and Asia in Asia, the place, to continue the thorough research and development process with the use of hemp extracts for prevention of SARS-CoV-2 infection, especially at a time when such significant need exists for preventative and therapeutic treatment of COVID-19. Now, so that was plants, and if you read farther into it, the researchers there are working with some cannabis sativa plants that are high in CBD and low in THC. And what's going on here is this study is basically building on that by just doing CBD only. Let's go ahead and read it. The Canadian team recently published the results of their non-peer-reviewed study indicating that CBD could help block the molecule that COVID uses to invade a person's cells and spread it throughout their body. The new Maryland-based study attempts to further verify if CBD can reduce the activity of disease-carrying molecules and if it could be useful in preventing cytokine storms, the excessive inflammatory response associated with lung damage and death. In order to track their hypothesis, Maryland researchers will conduct a lab-based experiment to investigate whether CBD has an antiviral effect on cells infected with COVID-19. The team will use a CBD formulation created by BioRemedies MD and hope to shed greater light on whether or not CBD could be used as an effective treatment. So like I said, they're just scrapping the idea that we're going to focus on this cannabis with CBD and THC and then extract that. We're just going to use CBD and see what we get. All right, I don't know about y'all, but so far I have learned a lot more about what's being done in these studies than anything that AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Moderna has said about what they're doing with their vaccine research, other than giving it to people and hoping that they can do some research on it and not even really looking at the actual action. We heard before the vaccines, way back in 2019, when they were the people working on mRNA vaccines, were basically the messenger RNA vaccines. They were making promises like, oh, this thing's going to go and reprogram your cells so that they become super immune system self that will fight bacteria and virus. And, they said that. And then when people are out there in the public and they're like, oh yeah, they said that this stuff's going to reprogram your DNA. And then people call them conspiracy theorists. It's like, no, this is what the scientists working on these vaccines were bragging they would do. And it's like, so you don't even really know what they're doing. They're not telling you what the mRNA vaccines really do. They show you these diagrams and these explanations, but it doesn't really, it seems to me like it's just really theoretical and this is just one giant experiment. Whereas these are just small experiments and the results are absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, if you can take and get rid of the ARDS from killing people, there's 70% of all these coronavirus deaths could have been prevented. Unless, you understand that a lot of these people were going to die whether they got COVID-19 or not. But the thing is in my opinion, as it is right now, I would be extremely mad to find out that my relative was hooked up to a ventilator and ended up dying 2 or 3 days or the same day when they could have been hooked up to a CBD drip or something. Does this make any sense? And I guess, if I say that, if I say that this is what would work and the ventilators are killing people, they're going to delete my YouTube channel. And I'm trying not to swear because I want this video to be as less censored as possible. So we're going to just kind of stick to being cordial here. But it's really hard to hold back my anger on these people because it's like I said in the first video, it's the CDC, it's the NIH, who these are corrupt organizations with revolving doors to big pharma. The CDC is a patent organization. That's not something that's in America, in a capitalist system like America. A patent organization only serves one purpose, and that is to make money for the shareholders. They don't care about making you better. All right, that's why they had this big fight between remdesivir and hydroxychloroquine. You can't patent hydroxychloroquine. All right, you can patent remdesivir. In fact, Donald Rumsfeld holds the patent on it. So, trust the media, guys. Trust them. That's going to get you far. Just don't trust them, though, because they're not doing good things right now at all. So let's get into the clinical trial of combining CBD with steroid treatment in COVID-19 patients. And I've said it before, Israel is where you want to go if you want to see where real cannabis research is done. They've been doing it since the 60s. And they have never put roadblocks up. They've always let their scientists research cannabinoids, and that's where they discovered things like THC and CBD isolates, and they know what they're doing is good research. In America, you can't even do good research because they neuter you, and it's really complicated to even get approved to do research, and then you have to use their cannabis. So it's just absurd. Okay, at the Rabin Medical Center, they announced plans to begin administering CBD along with standard steroids to 10 COVID-19 patients during undergoing treatment at the hospital. Something you would never see happen in America, ever, 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 even though it works and it saved these people's lives. Doctors are hoping that CBD will enhance the effectiveness of steroids for those in life-threatening conditions. Rabin Medical Center is partnering with sterile biotechs and more research application in hopes of providing a quick, safe, and effective path to recovery for patients all around the world. If the results are positive, the trial may expand to 40 additional patients. June 22nd, 2020 update. Following the announcement of this clinical trial, a fortunate chain of events sparked a change in plans for the clinical trial. The Rabin Medical Center in Petah Tikva ran out of patients, and several Israeli medical centers closed their coronavirus wards as number of patients significantly waned. As a result, Stero is now turning its attention towards Europe, who is still seeing surging cases in many countries. While COVID is now a key element in their research, it was not the main focus of the trial. First and foremost, Stero hopes to determine if CBD can enhance the effects of corticosteroids for autoimmune illnesses such as lupus and Crohn's disease. Now, since corticosteroids have been shown recently to reduce the risk of hyperimmune system response that leads to death in nearly 70% of COVID cases, Stero seeks to understand that potential as well. In fact, a recent UK trial showed that specific corticosteroid dexamethasone reduced deaths of patients on ventilators by 1/3. If CBD could support this proven therapy, theoretically thousands of more lives could be saved. In the 4-month trial, Stero will give patients 300 milligrams a day, 10 times the amount generally used by consumers as a daily wellness supplement. Stero cautions readers not to experiment with this dose at home. Ooh, 300 milligrams of CBD. Don't do that at home. Like, come on. Please. 300 milligrams of THC. I mean, it's going to knock you out, but it's safe. There's nothing dangerous about it. There's definitely nothing dangerous about CBD in that level of dosage. We just did this study in Canada. Whole plant research, my favorite. So the task force in Congo is studying CBG, plant-based preventative treatment. CBG, one of the most underrated, under-discussed cannabinoid with the most medicinal potential, in my opinion, that we don't already know about, that we haven't studied enough on. We've studied CBD and THC a lot, and we know what they have the potential to do. We've only just begun to crack the surface on CBG. So anyway, Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi, I don't know. Anyway, Felix recently formed a Corona task force to research local solutions to the Covid-19 pandemic. Following his call for help, King Organics, a pharmaceutical-grade cannabis cultivation and extraction company, stepped up to research plant-based ingredients and offer one of its existing cannabinoid-based products to treat current patients. KKOG's Immunite product contains CBG along with essential vitamins A, B, C, D, B6, and chlorophyll. The company touts Immunite as a potential preventative treatment to strengthen the immune system and manage symptoms of respiratory tract infections and inflammation. According to Mr. Rene Joseph, the CEO of KKOG, in a recent press release, quote, Immunite is a significant breakthrough that could help in limiting severe COVID-19 infections and on the continent of Africa. We are grateful to have the assistance of the President of Congo as well as all of the ministers who have supported in making our work happen. Excellent. Here's an update on a study. Terpenes are better than CBD alone. Something I've been talking about for many years. Early results from an ongoing Israeli study show that the combination of CBD with terpenes, compounds that provide aroma and flavor in cannabis and other plants, was 2 times more effective at inhibiting cytokine activity than dexamethasone, a corticosteroid treatment found to significantly help hospitalized COVID-19 patients. The study looks at NTVRL, a proprietary terpene formulation developed by IBNA, which contains 30 individual terpenes that are potential anti-inflammatory agents. Researchers tested CBD alone, CBD with NTVRL, and dextromethasone, conducted on human peripheral blood mononuclear cells, PBMCs, from healthy donors. The study induced inflammation and performed cytotoxicity tests prior to cytokine storm experiment to ensure cell viability. The best results came from the combination of CBD and NTVRL, which was able to inhibit around 90% of tested cytokines. 90%. That would probably leave enough cytokines back to still do some damage, but not hurt you, you know. Dextromethasone was only able to inhibit around 30% of cytokines, which means combining terpenes with CBD might be twice as effective as the current leading treatment. What would you have to do to break through to the doctors that are doing this treatment right now with the steroids? You know what I mean? If all you're using is the dextromethasone, why not try the CBD with that? And then if you're only getting 30% with just the steroids, that's bad, you know. That's a really bad number. It's not going to work. Like, I don't know. It amazes me that we have to sit here and look at this study and know that people are going to die while we're looking at this study that could have been saved just by the administering of CBD and some terpenes. Wow. Exploring the connection between cannabis use and COVID. And by the way, let me just reiterate, this doesn't mean that if you have a cytokine storm forming in your chest that you could just pop some CBD in and be good. No, this is like, you would have had to have been doing treatment for days, you know. Ever since you found out you had coronavirus, you should be pounding as much CBD and smoking as much weed as you can. Oops, that might get my channel deleted saying that. I'm not a doctor and I'm not offering medical advice. I'm just saying, just based on reading these studies, it is sad that I would get considered spreading misinformation just by sharing this information. These are real studies being done by real people that have real intention to help people. Whether they have commercial, aspirations or not, give me a break. The vaccine manufacturers got billions of dollars in this program, Warp Speed, which basically got rid of any protocols that would make their research fail and was allowed them to roll out experimental vaccines that doesn't even prevent you from contracting or spreading the virus, which doesn't even qualify it as a vaccine. Fauci himself said it only reduces symptoms. Sounds like Sudafed or elderberry to me. But you're supposed to get the vaccine, and they're going to say that you're supposed to get the vaccine periodically, like twice a year, because the immunity only lasts so long, or there might be another variant of the coronavirus that's going to hit you. So all this talk about these vaccine companies, and they're getting big time paid by the government. Even the one, what was it Johnson & Johnson? One of the vaccine manufacturers wasn't in the Warp Speed program, didn't develop an mRNA vaccine. Their vaccine is the traditional type of vaccine that they've been trying to develop for decades and still haven't been able to. And yet they still got money for manufacturing and distribution from the government. Billions of dollars. So are you going to tell me that this research that we're doing on such a small level, like you've seen that one is 450,000, like this is research that needs funding. All right? Not manufacturing a bunch of garbage that you put in a needle and call it a vaccine. While cannabis use may help alleviate severe COVID-19 symptoms, this is exploring the connection between cannabis use and COVID, and this is a study, and I'm not too particularly impressed by the way that this study's been conducted. But anyway, a study done by researchers at the University of Western Australia found that cannabis use was also correlated with increased risk of contracting the disease. Come on, just quit it with this. This is just Reefer Madness. And it's not necessary. We don't need to hear you talking about this. Cannabis use during coronavirus has skyrocketed. Almost like 50% more people smoke weed than before the virus. 75% more old people. And I'm guessing it's because they have heard, or they think in their own mind, based on all the knowledge they have of cannabinoids and what their benefits are, know that cannabis is the cure. And I'm not saying it's a cure. I've covered that in my other video. There is no cure to anything. The only thing that is a cure is that you survive long enough for it to leave your body when it comes to viruses. All right, that's the cure. But cannabinoids can help you get through this. All right. So Dr. Peter Grinspoon, MD, who teaches at Harvard Medical School, points out that this type of study can't show causation, but he does say that there are theoretical reasons that cannabis may be a risk factor for COVID-19, particularly in earlier mild cases. I don't know about that either, man. Peter, okay, whatever. CBD actually suppresses the immune system, which early on, whether our immune system needs to be the strongest, could lead to worse infection. Also, smoking cannabis could cause mild chronic bronchitis, which puts lungs at a disadvantage, and the behaviors associated with cannabis smoking, such as gathering in groups and sharing joints and pipes, can also spread infection. Oh no! All of that is junk science, is what they call that. You didn't do any kind of research. You didn't actually go through these scenarios in a lab setting. You're just making wild assumptions based on things that might be true or might not be, depending on whatever. It just seems like common sense, and that's the way that they always do Reefer Madness or anything that leans towards, oh, cannabis might not be good, and in fact, it might be bad. You know, there's never any studies though. Just hypothetical. Oh, you guys passed a pipe. That guy had his lip on the pipe, and then the virus on his lip got on the pipe, and then you got the virus and you just sucked it right into your lung. I mean, this is just all, none of this has been looked at. Observational study, vaping and increased risk factors. Stanford University research published in the Journal of Adolescent Health found that teenagers and young adults who use e-cigarettes are 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with COVID-19, and those who both vape and smoke traditional cigarettes are 7 times more likely. I personally think that the PCR testing, which is completely not what should be done to test to see if you have a virus, especially a coronavirus, especially COVID-19, as this was stated by the guy who invented the PCR test. But PCR tests, and you're going to see this more and more in the news because they're admitting it. The CDC has long said that their success rates for PCR tests are not the best, and they've said that there's 30% false positives. And they've also said that if you do too many replications over 30 reps will give you a false positive. This is all true stuff. You all should have heard it by now, or the mainstream media is doing a very good job of suppressing that. But you're going to hear this more and more because they're going to start limiting the amount of reps that you can do, and the numbers are going to go down. So what I'm seeing here is just more scenarios where they have people that are getting tested so that they're going to get a bigger sample group, and then they focus in on these people that smoke, and whatever. The study included 4,351 people ages 13 to 24 who completed online surveys in May. The theory is that lung damage caused by vaping may make users more susceptible. That could be true, and I'm not going to discount that. I'm going to say that there's probably something to that, because vaping has caused a lot of pneumonias, upper respiratory infections, throat infections, and nasal problems. It's just a fact. And I think it has a little bit to do with the carriers that people are using to make the vape, or the way that vaping doesn't seem to deliver the proper nicotine or something, and people end up just abusing vaping just to get satisfaction. So I don't know. There's a lot of studies we need to do on this vaping stuff. Basically, vaping has been rolled out willy-nilly with zero research, and product liability is limited to just when somebody's vape pen blows up in their pocket or something. But the thing is it's safer than cigarettes, all right? It has way less dangers involved than cigarettes. Does that mean it's safe? Probably not. But what I would tell people is vaping should be your stepping stone away from smoking and using tobacco and nicotine altogether, because it's just not a good habit. But that's just me, and I don't want to sound like one of those old people yelling to get off my lawn. But anyway, the virus might also spread through the aerosols they exhale or by sharing vapes. Users are also more prone to touching their mouths. All of this is true, but it's an observational study. It's just, hey, we can look and see that this is something, and we're just telling you what we see. So if you want more science to that, you're going to have to actually do some research, just like I said about the Peter Grinspoon's thing about pipes. Peer-reviewed article, University of Nebraska calls for more cannabinoid research. Scientists from the University of Nebraska and the Texas Biomedical Research Institute are teaming up to recommend more research into how CBD could treat lung inflammation that causes most COVID-19 deaths. I'm guessing because weed's not really legal there. They just want more weed money. And if they can get a COVID medicine patented, by golly, they will. But anyway, let's look more seriously at their study. It's an article, in a peer-reviewed article published in the Brain, Behavior, and Immunity Journal. The researchers called for more studies to analyze cannabinoids and their antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties. They say these properties could be the key to limiting the deadly acute lung infection caused by coronavirus. In the paper, the team offered a detailed evidence to back their claim. Acute infection is associated with cytokine superstorm, which contributes to the symptoms of fever, cough, muscle pain. Researchers wrote, in critical cases, lung inflammation can cause pneumonia, which is extremely risky for patients with compromised immune systems. Okay, I agree. Here's a clinical trial, the first study in Israel to explore the effects of cannabinoids on white blood cells of the COVID-19 patient is moving into the next phase. In the latest Israeli study, researchers at the Center for Cannabis Research at Rambam Healthcare Campus in Haifa are investigating cannabis as a viable treatment for COVID-19. Campus researchers have been observing the effect of cannabis on 19 severely ill patients and plan to launch the next phase of clinical trials in the up and coming months. The team is investigating the plant's anti-inflammatory properties as a means to prevent cytokine storms, the inflammatory reaction that causes severe side effects in the infected patients. Data shows the majority COVID-19 mortality is caused by this uncontrolled inflammatory reaction. Scientists at the center identified 15 cannabis strains that could effectively prevent cytokine storms through its interaction with the body's endocannabinoid system. In a recent press release, the doctor of the center, Dr. Igel Loria Hayan, said, "We hope that by decoding the cannabinoid activity mechanism during inflammatory storms, we can treat COVID-19 patients where the conventional drugs have failed." To conduct the clinical trial, researchers will analyze the effects of cannabinoids on white blood cells using samples from COVID-19 patients. These samples are stored at Rambam's National Biobank of Research Specimens. According to Rambam's director, Dr. Shlomit Yehudai Rushev, this method will help the team understand how the body responds to the disease and develop effective vaccines and drugs. Moreover, these samples will help speed up the process. Quote, "We believe that we will be able to accelerate the pace of investigation and move more rapidly to clinical applications due to access to the National Biobank at Rambam," he said. Update on July 22nd of 2020. In an interview with the Fresh Toast, Dr. Laura Haydan indicated the team is gearing up for the next phase of research. Quote, "Based on the analysis, we will progress to the second clinical experiment where we will treat COVID-19 patients with the candidate strains that presented anti-inflammatory potential on human-derived cells." The first experiment, Dr. Haydan said. All right. And that was that was some good studies. Here's a couple weird ones. Could cannabis contract COVID-19 and pass it on to you? In the realm of absurd, I don't even know where to go with this, but this is another thing that happens in cannabis propaganda. All right, this has been the case since back in the day when they said that cannabis kills brain cells. How did they do that? Well, they research it by getting some monkeys high. How'd they really do it? Well, they hooked monkeys up to face masks that basically smoked pounds of weed and forced all this smoke into their lungs until they essentially died. So that's how they, and this is the absurd thing what they do always with cannabis, is they think of something that's hypothetically implausible and in reality probably impossible, but they still run with it. And here we go again. Can it happen? Probably not, but recent research indicates that the perfect storm of circumstances could lead to transmission from plant to person. Over 7 days, researchers at Medical Genomics Corporation extracted and quantitated SARS-CoV-2 that has been injected into hemp flower to estimate its stability as a disease carrier. The results show that cannabis could contain the virus for at least a week. According to researchers, the contamination risk lies in two main areas. For starters, growers must come in direct contact with the plant if they're infected with COVID. So a grower would go work on his plants, and then he's going to cough on it, or virus is going to leak onto the plant from the person. Oh yeah, and then if he's using bat guano, a common cannabis fertilizer, that's gonna, that's a rich source of coronaviruses. What? So, I guess if you're a grower and you've been using, bat guano for your whole life, like me, you're probably immune to coronaviruses because you've probably contracted 1 million of them. Which there are quite literally millions of coronaviruses. These findings are alarming, but must also be taken with a grain of salt. To date, coronavirus has never been detected on cannabis, and the lighting curing process may effectively prevent the plant from becoming an effective carrier. However, the lighting, when you light the fucking joint, when you light the joint, the curing process, that's where a lot of contamination goes to die, all right? However, given that cannabis is an inhaled product that requires manual contact to produce, medicinal genomics developed tools to detect coronavirus on a plant. Just get out of here with this. This is just someone else trying to make money. Oh, we have this thing to test your plant for coronavirus, or test your weed before you smoke it. Here's an epidemiological study, patterns and trends of cannabis patients during the Covid-19 pandemic. And I don't really know what the point of this is either, but no thanks on spying on me. I don't want you to. Led by epidemiologist and Professor Denise C. Vidot, PhD at the University of Miami Department of Public Health Sciences, is surveying cannabis patients worldwide to analyze the effects of coronavirus on their health and well-being. The first goal of the survey is to understand how recent changes in access to medical cannabis could negatively affect their mental and physical health. Well, see, that's just not the case. Medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, where that's available, has not been shut down. It's been considered essential, especially medical cannabis. And if it wasn't considered essential somewhere, they fought that and it was immediately overturned. So this is just not true. So I don't know what you're studying, The second aim is to investigate the sharing of inhaled cannabis products, which could contribute to accelerated coronavirus transmission. I want to get ahead of this because this is like the third time I've read this today. Dear Dr. Grinspoon, this Professor Denise Vidot, all you guys need to listen real closely. people don't do this as much as they used to. All right. There isn't those burn circles that there used to be back in the 80s and 90s that kind of wore out in the 2000s and beyond. As weed becomes more legal and people have their own supply, there isn't this need, or it's, and you know, the people smoking weed with a bunch of people in a circle, that's not a social activity. That was just because only one person in that group had weed. All right. This whole idea that people share weed, it just doesn't happen like it used to anymore. So it's just like everything in their research, they're always researching things that they think are part of the culture, things that they think weed smokers do, when these are speculative at best. And there's been no attempt at going out into society and seeing if this is really what is still going on. Do people share weed with each other and smoke weed together? Of course they do. But it's just not the thing that is what you say it is. And it was at one time. Unfortunately, medical cannabis patients are facing delays in accessing treatment due to COVID-19 related supply chain and business disruptions. I'm saying that's just not true. Nobody ever told anybody that grows the weed they have to stop growing or transporting or selling, and the distribution centers have not closed their doors even for one day. You can get curbside or delivery. And in fact, coronavirus actually accelerated policy to make it so delivery was more of an option in places where it wasn't allowed before. So it's just simply not true. This could have serious detrimental effects, which is why researchers at U of M are looking at data to analyze patterns and trends of patients during the outbreak. The goal is to have every medical cannabis user worldwide complete an anonymous survey providing details about changes in frequency, dosage, and route of cannabis use, along with any associated change in mental and physical health. The survey also asked patients about sharing products such as joints and vapes in an attempt to analyze how this could contribute to the spread of the disease. And again, these just acting like anybody that's spreading the disease is a scumbag, dirty, bad person. We need to exile them into a gulag somewhere. That's what's been going on throughout the whole coronavirus thing. You're supposed to shame your friends and neighbors and people at the store if they're not wearing masks or social distancing, arrest them. You know, this is garbage what they're telling people to do. Like, all the stuff that they've been rolling out with coronavirus is absurd. All right, this thing is like proven to be about as deadly as your typical flu. I just don't know what to say anymore about it. But no, marijuana users are not driving the infection rates up and the death rates. Are you trying to say that it's all our fault because we pass joints around and then we just keep spreading this thing? No, this is just absurd. The study is set for completion in August, but ACS has exclusive access to preliminary findings. Whatever. No one's caring about your study. Clinical trial in Israel hospital to begin administering cannabis to COVID-19 patients. Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv announced plans to examine the effects of cannabis on coronavirus patients by administering active plant extracts such as CBD to those in moderate condition. Doctors are seeking to capitalize on the plant's antiviral and anti-inflammatory properties to ease the symptoms of the disease. The hospital plans to administer treatment of 24 patients in multiple wards throughout the hospital. Led by Barak Cohen, senior anesthesiologist and the head of corona management at Ichilov, the team of researchers stressed that this is a novel approach to treatment and would only incorporate the safe and non-addictive components of cannabis. Because that's important. You know, people that might be dying of like these ARDS, we don't want them to get addicted to THC, which there's never been any actual evidence that that's possible. And also safe. THC is the safest medicine there is. Period. CBD, not even medicine. I mean, I guess you could call it medicine if it's actually doing these things. So yeah, but overall, it's not as medicinal, I will say, as THC, and a lot of this anti-inflammatory stuff going on with CBD would probably require a lot less THC if you were doing the same study. And if you do CBD and THC combined, again, the super bad effects of the THC high are basically negated. So this study is currently only associated with the hospital and does not have any pharmaceutical or government sponsorship. And I like those studies the best because there's no outside influence or monetary, incentive to try to do anything. And of course, we have NIDA, our friends over at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They can never let a good crisis go to waste when it comes to jumping on the Reefer Madness bandwagon that they created. The United States National Institute on Drug Abuse, which sole purpose is to oppose marijuana and psychedelic drugs. That's it. NIDA doesn't care about anything else. And they are one of the leading people to tell you that cannabis was not something that could help people overcome opioid addiction. Meanwhile, they just let them people die, and we find out that 70% of opioid addicts that tried cannabinoids, it was a success. So that's NIDA for you. That's what their job is to kill you. So the United States National Institute on Drug Abuse announced in March that it would provide funding and research on how smoking could negatively affect patient recovery from COVID-19. In its announcement, NIDA specified that it seeks to understand whether or not the most vulnerable populations, including those who smoke tobacco, marijuana, and vapes, are subject to even greater risk. NIDA explained that COVID-19 is known to attack the lungs. No, that's not true. COVID-19 creates cytokine storms, which then unleash this poison that tears your whole body apart wherever it's at. Could be your lungs or wherever. So just this could pose a serious threat to those with a history of smoking. And they always conflate smoking. They're just smoking, blanket. Smoking cannabis and smoking tobacco are two different things altogether. There's one has no studies on it to prove that it could actually harm your lungs. It's because it can't. And every time they try to do this study, it actually proves the opposite. So they bury them or try not to report too much on them. And then there's the other one, nicotine and tobacco, where we have found this is killing 500,000 people a year from lung disease and cancer and heart disease. 500,000 to, the 500,000 is just from lung cancer. You can just please stop conflating the two and stop acting like smoking just means anything you smoke because smoking's bad. Because smoking cannabis isn't even bad. I would argue that it's good for you. I've smoked cannabis my whole life. I could run just as much as anybody that don't. Additionally, people who use opioids or methamphetamine along with those who suffer from HIV could be especially vulnerable to attacks on the lungs and immune systems. How? Because of COVID or because they smoke? Because this is, again, without any scientific backing, and they're just going to throw these people right into this danger group, and it doesn't really specify what for. Now, you're saying if these people smoke and they get COVID, boom, they're dead. That's why NIDA is seeking to fund research to determine how drug use, especially smoking, could be a risk factor for the onset and spread of the disease. I would love to be a participant in this. By all means, sign me up. NIDA will accept applications through March 31st, 2021, and will give projects $100,000 per year in funding, but studies must be completed within 2 years. Good luck with that one. That's some garbage right there. Pretty sure you're not going to find anything because we've been sitting here with COVID-19 ravaging the world for a year now, and it doesn't look like there's a big, staple of, cases where we're like, oh, these people smoked weed and they had HIV and they used, methamphetamines. You don't have a bunch of that going on. I haven't heard anything like that at all. Like you see homeless populations that are really ridiculous, and we could probably do something to address that. by maybe doing something different with this crazy economy. But no, we're not gonna. We're just gonna. But what you could do is you could look at these homeless camps and see what's going on there. But you don't. You just want to pick on stoners. Because the NIDA, that's their job. Their job is to pick on marijuana. Smoking marijuana is bad. Okay. That's all they're going to ever do. So don't take anything they ever say seriously. Because the only reason they exist is to oppose marijuana. Mostly. Conclusion, the process of creating a vaccine or cannabis-based therapy for COVID-19 has only just begun. As of today, we have no clinical research to warrant medical claims, and the FDA has made that point clear. However, current clinical trials and previous research on the plant's therapeutical value may assist researchers in the hopes to develop an effective complementary treatment. And I highly recommend ACS as a source for your cannabis news, because they have a lot of good stuff on here. ACS Laboratory. They're a testing lab too, so doing good things. All right, guys, this thing went way longer than I wanted it to. I hope it was very informative, and I hope I don't get my channel deleted for simply reading these studies and maybe even having an opinion, which that's what all I have is an opinion. I'm no expert, and I don't want to give people medical advice either way. But I will say this: you have to be very, very skeptical about anybody talking about how cannabis isn't going to be helpful when it comes to COVID-19 treatment or preventing yourself from contracting this or any other virus. That's simply, there's no science that you could point to that says that it's not helpful. There's plenty of science you can point to that's already been in existence for a long time that shows the actions of cannabinoids on viruses. So start there, and stop believing mainstream media. Stop believing these pharmaceutical crooks at the NIH, CDC, WHO, Dr. Fauci himself, who's been lying to people under 6-7 presidents or whatever. Just do your own research. You can't get in trouble for that. But I can tell you what, you'll find out that everything they're saying is a bunch of bull crap. Sorry about any swearing. And that's all I got on this. Stay tuned for more. Up next, we're going to be talking about how local ordinances are trying to take out the old medical marijuana caregivers, specifically in Michigan. But this is happening anywhere where there was medical marijuana programs before recreational was legalized. And it's quite crazy that in 2021 we still have to deal with this. But yep, they don't want you to have anything. They don't want you to grow anything. They want you to go buy stuff at their store and be happy about it while they run warehouses. All right, that's all. Have a good one. Brando, the Weed Commando, signing out.